Hello, CACNA1A families. This is the final video in our series of how to read and understand your genetic test report. In this video, we will look at two sample test reports and decipher what the results mean. So let's start with our sample test number 1. Please keep in mind that your test results may not look exactly like this, and that's okay. It really depends on which company did the testing, but most of the information will be similar, if not the same. So we will go column by column and see what all the information means. So let's start with our first column, which is the gene. And the gene that's listed is the one in which the variant was found. In this case, it's CACNA1A. The next column says disease, and they will list any sort of disease that's been linked to mutations or variants in this gene. So in this case, the disease would be a CACNA1A related disorder. The next column is mode of inheritance, and it's listed as autosomal dominant. So let's take a look at what that means a little more. So this answers the question of how the variant is passed on to a family member. So there's two parts to being autosomal dominant. The first is that the variant is present on an autosome, which is one of those numbered chromosomes that we've talked about. And we know that CACNA1A is present on the 19th chromosome. And dominant means that only one copy of that variant is enough for symptoms to manifest. Remember, we have two copies of each chromosome. So if only one of them has a copy of the variant, you can still see those symptoms. You might have heard of recessive variants or recessive mutations, and that's when you need two copies of the variant to see any sort of symptoms. But most of the CACNA1A variants that have been reported show a dominant pattern of inheritance. All right, so let's take a look at the variant here. So this answers the question, where is the change in the protein? So the P means we're looking at the protein. That first letter you see represents the original amino acid. In this case, it's V or valine. And the number shows you the position where the change occurs. So this change occurred at amino acid number 1393. And that last letter tells us the new amino acid. In this case, it's M or methionine. Okay, so let's look at the coding DNA. So this tells us where the changes in the coding DNA, or all the exons that have been put together. So once again, C represents the DNA. This number tells you the position where the nucleotide change occurs. This first letter tells you the original nucleotide. In this case, it was G or guanine. And the last letter tells you the new nucleotide. And here it's A or adenine. Okay, this next column talks about zygosity. So zygosity is referring to what the genetic makeup is of the chromosomes. So you can either be homozygous, which means that both chromosomes have the same version of the gene, as shown as the blue lines on both of the chromosomes, or you can be heterozygous, which means that each chromosome has a different version of the gene, as shown here with the blue line on the left chromosome and the pink line on the right chromosome. Heterozygous can also be thought of as only one chromosome has the variant. And again, the reported CACNA1A variants that we know of show this heterozygous zygosity. All right, this next column tells us from who the variant was inherited. In this case, it was the father, who was apparently mosaic. And mosaic just means the variant was actually not present in all of his cells, but it was still able to be passed on. Classification tells us whether that variant is pathogenic or not. In this case, it is pathogenic. So a pathogenic variant means that there's strong data linking it to a disease. Sometimes a variant can be classified as likely pathogenic, which means that there's some data linking it to disease. And sometimes you might see something called VUS, or a variant of unknown significance. And this usually means that there's little or no data linking it to disease, or that there might be conflicting data. So researchers aren't sure how to categorize it yet. But these VUS variants don't necessarily mean that they're not doing anything. More research is needed to figure out what their effects are. All right, so let's go through one more sample test here. So here we have the gene in which the mutation was found, CACNA1A. And the disease listed here is a CACNA1A related disorder. The mode of inheritance is autosomal dominant. So this variant is on an autosome and it has a dominant pattern of inheritance. The variant here, we're looking at the protein, where the amino acid ASP or aspartic acid at position 1634 was changed into the amino acid ASN or asparagine. The coding DNA change is that at position 4900, the nucleotide G or guanine was changed to an A or adenine. And the zygosity here is heterozygous. So again, only one of the chromosomes contains a copy of the variant. So the inherited from column has something new, de novo. And de novo itself means new. So the variant occurred in the individual and was not inherited from either biological parent. And lastly, the classification here is likely pathogenic. So there is some data linking this variant to a disease. So if you have a CACNA1A variant, does this mean that you have a CACNA1A related disorder? And that's a question that you will have to discuss with your genetic counselor and your medical team. And they'll consider all of the symptoms that are present or have presented themselves. They will consider individual and family medical history. And they might also consider whether you have variants in other genes, because genes never work alone. So a variant in one gene can very well affect the behavior of other genes, especially if they're in the same biological pathway. Thank you for watching all of these videos. We at the CACNA1A Foundation want you to know that we are here for you. And if you're watching these videos, hopefully it means that you found our website, but we do invite you to come and explore all the different resources that we've set up, not just for you and your family, but for your medical team as well. You can always reach out to us at our email address that's listed below, and you can also find us on Facebook. Please know that you are not alone in this.